Hey guys, welcome back. So I want to take a minute, if I may, and talk about the Principality of Madripoor and much of its wonderful locations, pastime residents, and visitors, to whom there have been many of, and we'll talk about a few here, like Wolverine when he went under the name of Patch, but then you also have Joe Fixit, Taskmaster, and even at one point NSYNC, because you know the stars definitely come out and gotta see what's going on in Madripoor, because there's some entertainment that you would find there that you just wouldn't find anywhere else in the world. So let's get into it. But first, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to catch the spills every week. And don't forget to hit that bell up top so we can squat up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so jumping in, we had initially got the first appearance of Madripoor within Volume 1 of New Mutants, issue 32, to where at the time a member of the team, Karma, she had lost control of her powers, which are mainly like telepathy or mind possession, to where she can take over someone's body as a host, and psychic shields to protect her from other telepaths. But back at the time, this had stemmed from a number of events that led all the way from your earlier issues of New Mutants, like somewhere around issue 5 or 6, to where Karma had led the team to rescue Dani Moonstar from both the Silver Samurai and Madam Hydra, to whom Madam Hydra, she's also just referred to as Viper, but with doing so taking the fight straight to one of Viper's estates, which had also led the team into a trap, because while the New Mutants were inside rescuing Dani, we then find out that Madam Hydra and the Silver Samurai, that they were actually right outside on a yacht, and they had set the place to explode with the New Mutants inside, which also gave us like this crazy reality flip, because seconds before the explosion happened, we had also seen the team inside with Madam Hydra, who was telling Karma not to do this deal with her uncle, which we'll talk about more in a little bit, but it was at this time that we saw Karma perceiving things in her mind differently from how they had played out, because in this moment, Karma also believes that her and the others get this message from Xavier that mainly goes along the lines of her getting reprimanded, but then you have this case where she hears Charles differently from everyone else, which we would later find out was actually the Shadow King telling her that he's going to take her body and soul forever. But even with this happening and everybody surfacing except for Karma, it was believed that she was killed. But to make a long story short, Sunspot had urged the others to keep looking for her because Karma had disappeared as if she was never there. And when I say make a long story short, I'm talking about from issue 6 all the way to issue 32. But essentially the way this had panned out, they had followed a number of leads, to whom one of which was mainly Karma's uncle, General Koi, because Karma had made a deal with her uncle to use her powers and his services for a year in exchange for him giving up the information of the location of Silver Samurai and Madam Hydra, who had Dani Moonstar. But with knowing that she agreed to this deal, and also considering their previous encounter with Madam Hydra, Doug Ramsey, aka Cypher, he took all of this information and put it with the description of Karma's change in behavior, and he hacked a number of international networks in order to track her down. And this is what led them to Madripoor, which is where Doug had found his first match. But then it's here with the setup of this story to where we get our first impressions of Madripoor from the writing of Chris Claremont and the illustrations of Steve Leialoha, who with intention created this island, which is a haven for world-class pirates and international criminals of all sorts. And it's also like here in issue 32 of New Mutants, where Doug Ramsey describes this place as Earth's version of Mos Eisley, which was like your spaceport location from Star Wars and New Hope, where Luke Skywalker and Ben Kenobi met Han Solo and Chewbacca. But much like Mos Eisley, Madripoor is a place where bandits and crooks from all over, they can meet up, they can do trades, they can do business. But this also showed us that Mos Eisley was one of the initial inspirations to the creation of Madripoor as far as what it is and the purpose it serves. And as far as the name Madripoor, like within the creation and that choosing of that name, my guess is just that it was relative to its location, with it being just south of Singapore. But in my opinion, like where the story of Madripoor like began to get interesting, like that would have to be the writing of Chris Claremont within Marvel Comics Presents Wolverine, because it was here where Madripoor was used pretty heavily to tell a number of stories about Wolverine, of which prior to the time like we just didn't know, like things about Wolverine's early run-in with Roche and Razor Fist, which left him heavily injured, but because himself and a number of the X-Men were supposed to be dead, he had then just wore an eye patch, and he had just went under the name Patch, really to just conceal any association of the X-Men returning anytime soon. But between Marvel Comics Presents and also Wolverine Volume 2, it was here where we got all our early looks at Madripoor and either how posh or how grimy it could be, which for the most part separated the island into two parts, which are pretty much your Hightown and your Lowtown. But from here, like starting with your Lowtown, which is pretty much where a lot of the Patch Wolverine stories come from, and even your stories about Wolverine before he was Patch. But most of them would take place in Lowtown, and they will revolve heavily around Logan's history with the Princess Bar. And from what I remember, that mainly began with Logan meeting Seraph, who is the current owner of the Princess Bar, like in the 1920s, and she had went on to own the bar for a number of years, even through to 1941, when Captain America had went to Madripoor during World War II, and Logan had to save this guy from getting jumped by the Hand, which on one side was Cap's introduction to Madripoor, but then also Logan's first time meeting Captain America. But then also years later, the Princess Bars where Wolverine had reunited with Tiger, who he would later find out was the same young lady who had nursed him to health, and she had also had a common enemy in both Roche, one of the previous crime lords of Madripoor, as well as the Reavers. But like on the surface, like the Princess Bar, it seems like it may be out of place, with its theme being very much inspired by Casablanca, while in contrast, many of the other bars in Lowtown aren't nearly half as nice. In most places that you would see as nice as the Princess Bar, they would be in Hightown. But with the Princess Bar being located in Lowtown, this would have much to do with it being built on top of the subterranean network that runs below Madripoor since like the early 1800s. But for the most part in Lowtown, you have your other bars like your Harbor Bar, like we had seen General Ross visit in your early issues of Volume 2 of Thunderbolts, which at the time was just really showing that Lowtown was the place that you would go if you needed to disappear in Madripoor and you didn't necessarily have the money to disappear in Hightown. But this was something at the time that Thunderbolt Ross was aware of, because he knew this is one of the best places to find someone who didn't want to be found. But through all of Lowtown, Wharfside, being that it's considered one of the most dangerous areas within Lowtown, but for example, like in Captain America Volume 9, we'd find General Alexander Luck in here, who had been recently resurrected by his wife, Alexa, but it wasn't until they arrived in Wharfside where he told her that he had been harboring the remnant of Red Skull in his mind all this time. But then on a brighter note, you also have locations like the Foxy Den Strip Bar, but for the record, I'm pretty sure it got destroyed by Rough House and Bloodscream during Iron Man Director of S.H.I.E.L.D., but if you've seen one strip bar in Lowtown, you've pretty much seen them all. But for the most part within Lowtown, like aside from your bars and your brothels, it's here where you also have like your industrial areas. Like for example, your Jade Dragon Triad factory, which pretty much just makes bootleg and knockoff products like all day. And so if you get a gift from someone and on the back it says made in Madripoor, there's a pretty good chance it was produced in Lowtown. But from here, then jumping over to Hightown, it's here where you have most of your tourist attractions, like your Wheelers and Dealers Casino or your King's Impresario restaurant. But then like the biggest attractions would have to be like their top 3 hotels, because in Hightown with the 3 hotels you have your Imperial Hotel, which is kind of like your entry level fancy, because that's pretty much how it was presented in Wolverine Volume 2 when we had seen like the B-list actress Lindsay McCabe, I think it was. But within the story of Sword Quest, with her arriving here, it pretty much put a stamp on the hotel saying like this is where the B-list actors go. And so for the next hotel, you have the Sovereign. And the Sovereign Hotel is like as nice as it gets. It's the most expensive hotel, and not only in Madripoor, but in the world. And this is also the hotel which Joe Fixit had came to visit when he was commissioned from Tahoe, Nevada, and Patch, who had got the word from Karma in Madripoor that Joe Fixit was coming to town to be an enforcer and a threat to her uncle, General Coy. Which is what then led Logan, or Patch, to follow Joe Fixit from the airport back to the Sovereign Hotel, to where he noticed that Joe Fixit would sleep during the day, turning back into Banner, which is something that ultimately Patch used as like a way to play pranks on him, because he recognized his scent and he knew who he was. So he replaced all his luggage with like torn purple pants, and eventually he used the turning into Banner during the daytime thing as a bit of a bargaining chip to threaten Joe Fixit to leave after he finished his affairs, because during the night Joe Fixit may be indestructible, but during the daytime while he sleep as Banner, more or less accidents can happen. But then aside from this, you also have like your Monarch Hotel, which is a hotel that's usually suited for more of your corporate setting, but a corporate meeting in Madripoor, it can range anywhere from capturing Thunderbolts and brutally interrogating them, to it also being a location where different people from different countries would meet to make negotiations that weren't necessarily legal in their countries. And speaking of which, it was also in Hightown, to where in X-Men Blue, we got the newer version of the Xavier Mansion, which Magneto had established in Madripoor, to where he had told the time-displaced X-Men that he wanted to teach them here and preserve Xavier's dream. But lo and behold, this was something that had also taken place during Secret Empire, and it wasn't until later that we had found out, like in the case of Magneto, who had already been laying low in Madripoor because he didn't want anyone to know he was still alive, but when he was laying low in Madripoor and he was found by your Super Secret Hydra Captain Rogers, Cosmic Cube Captain Rogers, but he had found Magneto in Madripoor and given him the heads up during Secret Empire, and with doing so making a deal with Magneto that if he just stayed in Madripoor and laid low and stayed out of Hydra's way, then Magneto wouldn't have to worry about Hydra for years to come. And during those years, Magneto was free to build whatever he wanted, but even with doing so, Cosmic Cube Cap, he let Magneto know that Hydra had no plans for human and mutant coexistence. And also just to show like how serious he was, like he left Magneto the head of Red Skull like just as a parting gift. But then aside from this, like getting into some of the events that take place in Madripoor that you just wouldn't see anywhere else. And that would have to be the underground blood sport tournament. And I mean like literally underground, like under Madam Hydra's estate. But in Wolverine Volume 2, we gotta look at this crazy underground tournament within the 3-part series of Bloodsport, and a ton of people were there, from Headhunter to Puma to Taskmaster. Razor Fist was there, and like these matches were brutal. But even still, like in Madripoor, pretty much everything's legal, but seats to a tournament like this, they weren't just open to everybody. So when you look in the crowd and you see people like NSYNC, it lets you know at the time that the viewing of this tournament was very high profile. But one of the things that I liked about it at the time was like with Taskmaster, he would admit that he only went to these tournaments so that he could show off and then raise his price as a trainer to whatever villain or mercenary who would want to hire him in the future. But unfortunately, him and many others had lost to Mr. X, who was like the long-time reigning champion of the Bloodsport tournament because he would keep winning like year after year, which was mainly because he was a low-level telepath who could read the minds of his opponents and know their next move before they even make them. But aside from this, we'd also seen other underground tournaments in Madripoor, like what we had seen with Shatterstar and Ultimate Warrior, to where the tournament he was in, it was like underground in a pocket dimension underneath the Lotus Cafe. But that's not even where the weirdness begins. Like, let's talk about some of the weird stuff, because when we go over to Avengers World, like this is where we got to see that Madripoor had been sitting on top of the head of a dragon for ages, and when it was awakened through a ritual that was done by Gorgon in the hand, Shang-Chi had initially fought Gorgon and lost. And I mean, it was a good fight, but Gorgon had came out with the win. But then not long after, when Shang-Chi had got some help from Spear, who was like the Chinese version of S.H.I.E.L.D., but they had then reached out to S.H.I.E.L.D. for some pin particles so they could give them to Shang-Chi so that he could then defeat this dragon, which he then did by tearing the entire temple out of the city with Gorgon in it and just throwing it away. Like it was nuts. Like King Kong versus Godzilla, eat your heart out. And I mean, like in Avengers World period, like Marco Cicchetto's artwork is just nuts. Like it's just through the roof, man. But then also you have like the invasion of Khan that had taken place on Madripoor within the issues of Extreme X-Men, to where he had tried to add this world to like his multi-dimensional empire. But then along the way he fell in love with Storm, and then it got weird. But then last but not least, you had the whole situation in X Factor where Lila had stole an egg, like she had stole from its home planet, but then a traveling thief by the name of Jornik stole it from her, and at one point like she called Jornik Jor-El, and I'm not sure where she heard that name from. But this situation soon went chaotic when the egg had hatched, and the Erg was going crazy. Like Polaris couldn't stop it, Havoc couldn't stop it, but eventually this was solved by sending the Erg back to its home world. But that'll do it for this one, guys. I just wanted to take a quick tour of Madripoor and, you know, just give you the heads up, so if any of you guys are planning on going anytime soon, you'll more or less just know what to look for, or look out for, better yet. And so now real quick, I want to give a special shout out to all the patrons and some new patrons for the month: Jonah B, Devon W, Jacob L, and Miles. Thank you guys for your support and welcome to the Patreon gang. And for anyone who's new here who wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link below so you can go to patreon.com/dopespill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and we'll do it again on the next one. Alright, later.